Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Gainesville PowerShell user group. I almost said PowerShell podcast, but that's not what we're doing today. We have amazingly special guest, Joe Gasper, Microsoft MVP of M365 Apps and Services. Congrats to him on that. He's going to be talking about exploring SharePoint. What's the full title? Exploring SharePoint and
PowerShell.
yes. SharePoint and Teams. Awesome. For the non-app, very cool, very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks to Joe. Joe, take it away.
Get unmuted here. Got any feedback there? Okay, we're good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good evening. Andrew and Andrew, thank you for having me. I see one of the Andrews. I see Andrew Carey many days since I worked with him. So it's fun to actually have some time after work to spend some time with him. Although you're putting me to work, so it's okay. My name is Joe Gasper. I'm a recent MVP, just October. I in the Microsoft 365 Apps and Services, and I spent most of my time probably in community development, training people in a couple communities that I have with a colleague of mine, and we focus on Microsoft 365, focus on the suite of tools up there, and really dive into helping end users in those communities. One's called Cloud Accounting. That's a cute, fun name, of course, for cloud services, but we talk about Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, Forms, how to take advantage of all of those. So that's kind of what helped me get my first MVP. My LinkedIn link is there. I also, not sure as I'm good of a shill as Andrew Pla is, but I do have a podcast also centered around the modern workplace. A little bit of a hiatus right now. We're probably going to do another recording next week and get back at it monthly. So we talk about everything Microsoft 365, collaboration, that kind of things we like to chat about. Today, I'm going to talk about some ways that I take advantage of PowerShell, and specifically a couple of modules that are very important and very helpful for managing SharePoint, managing Teams, and go through this these modules a little bit. First one we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about something called PnP.PowerShell. We're going to talk about that module, Microsoft Teams module, and some kind of ways that I've applied and used those tools. Let's get started with what is PnP. I think I really wanted to talk about this before we get started into some coding and things like that, because this is just a really, really helpful module. It is the go-to module for a number of applications that are in the Microsoft 365 cloud. PnP, it is more than just a PowerShell module. We'll kind of discover that. But the PnP is for patterns and practices. And that is a way that developers come up with ways in which they do repeatable work. I have some code I need to write, and I want to always have this way I upload a file. I want to do it consistently, and I want to do it across my company. We come up with some patterns, we come up with some practices in the way in which we do that kind of work. So this PnP concept has been around in Microsoft for at least 20 years. They have a patterns and practices group. And in 2014, there was a merging of a couple of different patterns and practices between some development teams, SharePoint team, Office 365 team, and that's what brought us this Microsoft 365 PnP process. But I think it really wanted to key in here, and I kind of bolded some of these, that this is not just about a module. There really is a big community behind this. There's a lot of other resources if you do anything in the Microsoft 365 space, a lot of resources to take advantage of. This community is developing all these resources in GitHub. It's open source. There's community members that are MVP, there's Microsoft members, employees, and they're developing a suite of tools, a suite of practices across the whole breadth of the Microsoft 365 suite. Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, you name it, they are doing it. A number of resources are available, and it's interesting that the community is in that link. It really is a community. I'm just going to open up a couple of these and bring those over. I really love their logo. I'm so need a sticker of that. But again, they've got blogs, guidance, samples. There's weekly calls across a different breadth of development, how to use the platform, Power Platform, all these Office add-ins, you name it. The solutions gallery is pretty amazing with respect to someone has figured out how to do something and they share it out there. It's a really great community to get involved with and see how things are done. Their videos, I think they have a couple thousand videos out there on YouTube, recordings of their weekly meetings, things like that. So again, great community, great place to get started, open source. The PnP module is open source. Running it on, can run on Mac, run on Linux. I'm going to be using it on PowerShell 7. That's what I would be recommending as we go through some demos and talk about that. The first thing I'm going to do is I needed to set up kind of my environment in this platform. So I needed to run a few little commands. I've already got that set up, help with this process as I go through this. Very standard things here. Usually when we're working with Microsoft 365 in the cloud, we've got a tenant of some sort we're working with. We've got some accounts. I'm going to be working mostly with the Megan account, Megan Bowen, very famous Microsoft employee, but she shows up in all the demo tenants that I'm working with. So I'm going to be doing most of the work with her account, not a global admin. She might be a team owner. She might be a SharePoint owner, but not someone who has anything beyond that elevated commands. So I've already kind of completed that work. Hopefully I put the passwords in correctly. So let's just get started. We're going to go through installing these modules. The first one is Microsoft Teams. That module is called Microsoft Teams. Now, again, I've already installed that module. Take a quick look at that. There's quite a number of commands in there. And also, which is very fun and interesting right now, is that we're going to have fun using 5.0.0 in this demo process. So hopefully that nice release is going to be good to us today. The next module that we're going to get started into also is the PnP.PowerShell module. And it really puts power in the shell in this one. So let's, I think they've hit over 600 in this 665 commands in this module. And again, it's not just exclusive to Teams or SharePoint. There's Planner in here. There's a graph. There's a number. It just keeps growing and growing because it's open source. People need something. Someone says, we'll go figure out how to do that. Now, there's some overlap in these two modules, the Microsoft Teams and in the PnP PowerShell. Take a look at that a bit. Let's take a look at the PowerShell, PnP PowerShell. What can it do with channels? If I want to work with a Teams channel, Microsoft Teams channels. If you don't know what those are, I mean, maybe they're sort of a Slack world channel kind of thing like that. But there's a few commands I can do in there. I can get information about a channel, add users to channels, remove them. Pretty basic stuff that I'd want to be able to do to a channel are all right there in the PnP PowerShell module. Now again, remember, this one is open source. Microsoft Teams is coming from the Microsoft Teams team. And this one is going to also have a number of commands related to channels. Again, I'm just pulling out channel ones. Same thing, I can add channel users, I can get information, I can create new channels. We're going to see, though, typically in this case, we're going to have a little more policy related information that you can touch inside of Microsoft Teams module. You'll also find the Microsoft Teams module, occasionally a new feature will come out that's available in a tenant, in an organization, and Microsoft will release a way for a global admin to make a setting change. And often that'll happen perhaps before there's a way to do it in an administrative interface. We're gonna get that kind of changes coming through the Microsoft Teams module. So you can use both to do these types of options. It really probably comes down to a little bit of maybe you're using some other features in PnP PowerShell. You could stay in there and continue doing work with perhaps a Teams channel or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily have to switch over to do Microsoft Teams. Again, probably Microsoft Teams, if you're a global admin, a Teams administrator level, you might spend a little more time in there for some of the features, commands it has. Some fun issues that might show up if you've not run PnP PowerShell against your tenant ever. I would be surprised, maybe a small tenant, and you're able to do everything in the browser, that you may not have encountered it. But the first time you run this against a tenant, you're gonna get blocked, and a global administrator needs to consent to this tool accessing and touching your organization. It can look a little scary, but some things you can do to help your global admin is you can actually run a little command that's going to spit out a URL that you can send to them that will enable them to authenticate and kind of jump right to the point where they need to authorize the connection to this, allow this PnP PowerShell module to connect. It's taken a little long, but I have a copy of kind of what this link looks like. But what we're basically going to produce is a link you can send to your developer or your global admin, sorry. And when they click on that, do some authentication, they're going to get this nice, huge scrolling permissions request box. It's a little small, hard to read. That's okay. There's things in there about read all usage reports, read user and shared email. I can send mail as a user, read, write all groups. These, why would I want to allow somebody to do that? You're not allowing somebody to do that. You're allowing the module to do that, and it's up to the permissions that the person running the module has been granted. So hopefully that's something that if you're not able to run these tools, you can work with your global admin and work through those, get through that process. So how do we start taking advantage of this? We want to connect to SharePoint. We're going to do something in SharePoint Online. You can see it down there. We're gonna open up and create a communication site. That's our plan. So first thing we want to do is our command is going to be connect to PnP Online. We have to feed it our tenant, our SharePoint URL tenant, feed it some credentials. Let's see if this will run. The other one is still running, but let's give this a shot. I am running a few extra commands down here to give you an idea of seeing some extra information. Typically, as an end user, you're just going to need to do something that looks like this. This will help you get through an MFA connection. If you've got two-factor going on, that will pop up an interface for you to use. that you can, again, walk through a two-factor authentication. It's going to pop up a web browser and help you get through. I am not sure if we all have something going on here. Let's stop this. Great. Let's try this again. I have to. That one timed out. Canceled. Sorry, y'all. Clearly, unfortunately, we still have internet, so that's not our problem here, as you're all able to see me. But my tenant is not having a good time. I'm going to restart this.
While this restarts, I have a quick question
for this section. Yes.
Okay, so what is this .NET Interactive Notebook thing, the .dib file? What's going on here?
This is something called Polyglot Notebook. It is like something maybe more commonly understood of something called a Jupyter Notebook. So it's a way to run, typically, as I've been doing it all week, basically interactive PowerShell commands. In this case, I'm able to run PowerShell inside of this environment. Typically, Jupyter notebooks have been built around Python and running Python that way. So this enables brand new from Microsoft. There's a Polyglot. They're enabling us to run multiple languages inside of one file like this. So thinking about it for training, maybe there's maybe you've got some code in your area that you work that maybe it could be run in PowerShell, maybe some of it's Python, maybe he has to run it because different languages. You can put all that information in here and actually run the code live in. And this is Visual Studio Code. I'm running it in code, but I could have multiple processes that are running like that. I don't know. So far, unfortunately, this had a little hiccup here. Let's hope that it doesn't continue. All week while I've been building this and writing this, it has been really slick to work in this environment. So let's drop back down to where we were, which was let's get connected up. So that's better connection. Sorry about that all. So what I've done is making my first connection up to the SharePoint cloud, up to this Microsoft 365 organization using Megan's credentials. Now again, most of the time you probably would use this command. Mostly the one key here is interactive. That will again help you get through some multi-factor or two-factor authentication. Something to keep track of when you're working with PnP PowerShell is your connection. There's also called a context. Right now, the commands I shove up are going to be working with this URL. They're going to be working with this URL that I provided my connection string. So if I do anything, it's going to be operating against that SharePoint site. That's the root site. Typically, most people aren't going to be working there. But for building a brand new site, which we're going to do next, that is where we would point ourselves to. So we've got, let's just say we've got some project out here. Megan's got a new project she's working on. She really wants to get some information out to folks about it. And a great way to do it in SharePoint land is something called a communication site. It's designed for just a few editors and a lot of readers. Great, excellent way to do intranets if you have a Microsoft 365. Pretty amazing what you can make things look like. bring over this lookbook just to get inspired with what you can do with a communication site. I think, and this is SharePoint. If you've been working with SharePoint for a number of years, you would, you'd like, this is really what I can do with SharePoint. That does not look like a 2003, 2001 STS. That looks pretty impressive, and that's what you can get with a communication site. So that's what Megan wants to build. So let's have her build that. Let's get that up there. So she's going to build a communication site. She's got a CRM rollout that she wants to work on. We've got a type one communication site. We want to give it and we're going to give it a URL where we're going to put this. Now, typically in the cloud for Microsoft 365, there are two paths that we're going to have, sites or teams. Typically for myself, again, if you were to create a Microsoft Teams team, it would typically end up under a subfolder called Teams. I tend to put the non-team sites. What this is not connected to a Microsoft team, not connected to something called a Microsoft 365 group. I'm going to put that up under sites. That's something, again, you want to work out with your organization where best practice that. We can give it a description. I can also give it an initial site design, communication site, and give it an initial design, give it a topic. So I am building that parameter list, and we're going to pass that off. We're going to splat that into our new PnP site to create that. And this is creating a site collection, a full site collection. There we go. So that is our new site that has been created. Let me get Megan. Let's see. Connect it up. And let's bring that over and see what do we have. Too many browsers. Sorry, where is she? There's Megan. Sorry about that. Let's open that up. So that's a topical SharePoint communications site that she has set up. Wants to start working in and start doing some operations in here. So let's see what next she might want to do. One thing is she's working with a team member, and let's have her bring that team member in as also a site collection administrator. So early up in preparing for this, one of the first commands I was running was setting up some variables for some UPNs, some email authentication UPNs for these people that we're going to work with. So I'm going to connect to this new site. So again, I said, I need to switch my context. I want to start working in this new site where we've just created the CRM rollout. So we need to switch over to that first, authenticate as Megan again, and we're going to add another owner in there. So now Megan and Deborah are full site collection owners. She's got some backup. Now, when you're going to have a new rollout of some sort, we want to do a calendar is probably very helpful. So what we want to do next is want to develop and bring in a modern calendar into this SharePoint environment. I went through the process, saved 29 clicks, went through the process of what this takes to do this in the interface. So we will walk through what this is going to look like. We're going to create a SharePoint calendar. And again, I'll bring over the SharePoint side if you're not that familiar with this and what this looks like in this site. But we're going to give it a title. And it's, I know I'm creating a calendar. SharePoint, I like to say everything in SharePoint is a list. So a calendar happens to be a list that has a start and end date. That's how you get something on a calendar. So you could think of it just an Excel list. It's got some start and end dates, and I can slap that onto a calendar. So we're going to create a new list. Just going to be a generic list. I'm going to create some columns in SharePoint. We call those fields. So I'm going to create some columns to my list. Columns, again, think of like an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to add a start. I'm going to add an end. Those are going to be date time types. And I'm going to add a choice field, choices right here. I'm going to add type choice called event type. I'm going to give the ability for each one of those things that might go onto a calendar. They can choose meeting, review, or stand up for what that might be. The next thing that we're going to do is take a JSON file and we're going to create a view. So a view on a list is a way to take the data that's in your list and show it in some other fashion. Now, typically a SharePoint list doesn't have a calendar. It looks like a spreadsheet. It's got columns of information. So we want to create a view that is a calendar view. And this is the code to do that. We want to work with our start date and end date. We want to throw up a title on there. And we've got our calendar view styles. This is, I didn't write this, some other folks came up with that. Pretty much able to follow along, bring in your end start dates, title in, and that'll get that information up into and onto that calendar view. So those are what we need to create that view. Those are the pieces to that view that we need. And we actually run this through a REST method. This is also part of the PnP PowerShell module. There are a lot of RESTful endpoints in SharePoint Online that you can take advantage of when someone has developed an actual module for it yet. And that would be, in this case, this is one way to manage the way to get around that. There's obviously a way to, an API to create a calendar view. It hasn't been encoded in there yet, but this is a way we are able to take advantage of that. So that will set the things up that we need to develop for this view, and then we create it. So let's, again, we're going to create a calendar, we're going to add some columns to it, and we're going to create a view to it. Let's run this. See, we've got our columns created, some information here about the view being created, and that looks to be complete. So let's go back to this. Let's go back to this site. Is this Megan? That's Megan. So we got our CRM rollout. So let's go to site contents. This will give us an idea of everything that is in CRM rollout. And let's start with like SharePoint 2003. This is an events list. This is an old calendar. This is a calendar that has been around and available forever in SharePoint. It's not responsive. It is the old way to do things. It is not what they call a modern list and built on a modern list anymore. But if we go back and look at what we built events calendar. This has got a cleaner view to it. we can embed this easier into other SharePoint sites, use and take advantage of this. And it just looks a lot cleaner. If we want to create a new item on there, we put our title, put our start date. We've got our choice field here if you want to do this and take advantage of this. So now we've got an event there. So in SharePoint land, this is a view. If you work with an Excel file and you've got multiple people working with that Excel file, it might be nice to sort a column. Often, if you're not paying attention, you're going to sort that column for everybody all at the same time in that Excel file. So a view allows you to create a view that I'm right now, only me, I'm looking at this calendar, this list, and I'm looking at it in the calendar view. I can go back and look at all items. So here's what, again, this looks like a spreadsheet that we created. You can add items in this view too, if you want. That gives us the ability to have this calendar view. Yeah. Somebody had a question? Hand raised question. I will try to answer security questions, sure.
My question, this is Ali. My question is you were mentioning earlier about having adding people to like the SharePoint site. That just kind of popped up in my head. Like with what you're doing, like what would you say is like a suggestion if you wanted to share something with someone who's not necessarily in your tenant, or like maybe like say outside of the organization is the best way I can put it. Like you don't necessarily want to make them an admin, but you do want to share certain things with them. So and if that's out of scope of this presentation, then I apologize. I don't want to take away time from what you're trying to present, but that was my question.
I can tackle that real quick. A SharePoint site, SharePoint Online site, you can share it to an external account. It's going to depend on the sharing policies that have been chosen at your tenant level, whether or not that external sharing has been enabled. Where I work, our tenant is pretty open, and we're able to, I know we have some of our like facilities operations architects who work all the time with external other companies and bring in those folks as a guest. So they don't need a license. They can bring them into a SharePoint site and help work with floor plans and things like that. So it is possible to do that work. Next we want to tackle is something that can happen in this world as we move more and more data into the cloud. Something can happen is people can delete things. And what happens to that in SharePoint Online? So SharePoint Online has a cloud recycle bin. And I've had the encounter several times where this is early on with OneDrive sharing, where someone has synced a Teams site, a SharePoint site, a document library to their computer, and they don't need to do it anymore. They've done syncing it. And this is what happens sometimes is they'll stop that process, but they won't let the cloud, they won't let their computer catch up to know that that's happened, and they will go and like delete the folder path that was on their computer where those files were, and it just starts deleting everything. Or someone, just someone fat-figs or something, and they delete and wipe out something. It's very easy to go into SharePoint Online, and it is actually SharePoint. So let's edit that real quick. You can go into the SharePoint recycle bin. We'll take a look at that, and recover files right from there, right graphically, no problem. We can do that. So let's go over and take a look at something that maybe Megan has had a problem with. Let's get in there. Is all right. That's where we want to go. Something happened in the communications team. There's some files in here in this Microsoft team. We got a ticket, said that there were some files in backup. We don't have them there. There's supposed to be a bunch more files in here. They're gone. Need some help. What do you do? So we can go into the SharePoint. The back end of the files part of a Microsoft Teams site is in SharePoint, hidden very nicely. And there is a recycle bin. So I'm now looking at those are the same folders in that general channel. There's those files. I can hit recycle bin. And I can see files that have been deleted. I can see they've been deleted by, who is the original creator. I can see where they were deleted from. This is a really wonderful way to get things into the cloud it's more difficult to have that on a traditional Windows server. So that is something that's very nice, extra feature. Now, I could click on these, click on one, I could hit restore, and it's back to where it was, exactly where it was. But what if you have 70,000 of these? That has happened. That is not something you want to click. That is something that we use PowerShell for. So first thing we want to do is we want to go work over in that area. We want to connect to that communication site. Megan can do this work herself. She might have deleted all these 70,000. She can actually do this work herself. This is not going to require some extra elevated privileges to do this recovery. We're going to connect to there. What we're going to look at is we're going to get all the recycle bin items, and we're going to see where they've been deleted by Megan. Okay, we're going to check that out and see what that looks like. There were 21 items in there, and I just grabbed the first one. So that was actually deleted today. What if I know it was just a bunch of PowerPoint files? We can actually check and just give me a list of all the PowerPoint files that were deleted. Not a problem there. I could restore just the PowerPoint files if I want to. And I can also, this is what was really helpful in the situations I've had to deal with, is some event happened on a very specific day. This deletion happened yesterday. Megan's still working. She's still updating files. She's still deleting files today. We don't need to recover things that happened today. We need to do some type of recovery happened yesterday. So we're able to grab everything out of the recycle bin and narrow it down to Megan right here, and we can narrow it down to a deleted date. Let's take a look at that. There's only 20 of those because one of those deletions happened today. So we only want to restore those 20. Kick that off. Let's go see if that's working. Go back into documents, general. There's some files back in there. So that's working. Slow, I don't know if we deleted some out of there or not, but yep, there's some Contoso. Those are recovered. That'll bring back versions. It'll bring it back just like the way it was. So again, great way to use PowerShell when you've got thousands of files that might have happened to someone. So if that happens, don't freak out. There's a way to recover from that. certainly helpful for your users to know there's a way to recover from that. The next process we're going to talk about is, as we've been modernizing in my world, moving away from traditional file servers and moving more and more things into the cloud, we have had the need for traditional, Windows Server. It has got a group of folders that are deeply permissioned. Individual groups have access. It can be a mess, a hot mess. We've got a process here that we need to do. And this is something that is typically done for, let's say we want to get some reports out to a group of people. So what we're going to do is, let's say we've got, for this company, we've got regions. Each region has got countries. There's a regional manager, there's a country manager, and we need to push out reports to these folks that they can access it. And of course, it's never that easy. Someone says, well, I want people to be able to access all regional files. I want some people to access all the files. I want some people to just view everything. I want some people just to be able to add content. How do we do that? Can we do that in SharePoint? Can we actually pull it off? We can. And we're going to kind of go through and talk about how we do that. So let's pull up retail. This is kicking me into a different copy. Let's edit that. Sorry, that kicks me into a non-private browser. So this is a bit of a trouble there. Let's get back to Megan. Let's go to here. And it, have to get a little familiar with SharePoint security. What can we do with it? We're going to look at user, we're going to look at groups. So SharePoint has its own concept of security groups. There are security groups that only live and exist in SharePoint Online. They can contain, if you've got a hybrid environment and you are connected to on-premises Active Directory, you can bring those in. You can bring in some cloud groups. You can bring those in and integrate them. But typically a best practice is to take SharePoint groups and permission those against objects, a list, a library, individual documents, folders. You can do that. You would bring in your Active Directory groups, perhaps, into the SharePoint group, or something like that is what you would do. So a typical out-of-the-box standard SharePoint site collection is going to have members, owners, and visitors that you can work with right off the bat. And visitors, drop somebody into visitors, they can read everything. Drop somebody into owners, they can full control. Members are able to contribute, edit, update documents, and work like that. So that's something you're going to find just kind of out of the box in every one of your site collections. Now, this site collection has some users that have been enabled in it. These are the members of the Microsoft team. This does have a team attached to it and behind it. So there's some users in here. We can see our site collection administrators. That's the owners of the team, Microsoft Teams, that are in there. Megan is one of those folks. So we're going to go build this structure. We would want to use because this is tied to Microsoft Teams, we're going to want to create our own document library and work in there. You're not going to want to touch a document library like this that is part of Microsoft Teams. And that's, so we're going to create a new one. We're going to first set up a few variables. We're going to call a document library reports. We know we've got to work with the retail members. We need to work with the retail owners. We're also going to, we got this request that said, I need to have somebody who can only add files to this area. They can't edit, delete, they can just add stuff. So we've got to create and do something with this thing called add. We're going to call it add only. I'm going to generate some of the data to work with. So we've got our regions, our countries, our regional managers, our city managers. This might be coming from an Excel file or a C. I'm just building it on the fly for us. So let's get this connected and started. So now we've got a true PowerShell object for countries with all this data in there. We can do some work with it going forward. First thing I like to do in this case, again, we're trying to mimic something that is often found on premises. That's difficult to do on premises also is with the cloud, I try to give our users more power, enable them to do more of the operations. If I was going to have an on-premises Active Directory permissioned file share, it might be a little more difficult to give individual users the ability to add and remove people to groups. It's possible, we do it. It's more typical tickets to come in and some admin adds and removes people to groups to give them access to resources. In the cloud, we're able to do that a little differently, and I usually try to give some set that up for it to be possible. One of the things I like to do is create a SharePoint group that manages all the other groups. So that's what we're doing here. The other thing that's a little different with SharePoint permissions than we're used to on premises doing our sysadmin kind of work is the concept around SharePoint has with inheriting permissions. It does not work the same way as NTFS permissions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out and start preparing some base permissions for this brand new document library. Because I'm going to create a new document library. Inside that document library, I'm going to create some folders based upon a region. And I want some of the permissions to flow through at a certain point as we go through this. We'll work on kind of describing how that is helpful. So I need to create some security groups that I'm going to apply against all these files. I want one that can view everything. I want one that can add everything. I want one that can modify everything. And they're going to get these SharePoint security groups are going to get named after the document library and have all view, all add, all modify. The other thing we need to do is this, how do we deal with this add only? We need to be able to give a role to a group, to people that says, I can only add things. Now there's already a role they call permission levels in SharePoint called contribute. That of course would have a little bit more than we want than add only. Contribute allows us to delete items, edit items, and delete versions. We don't want any of that. We're just going to set them up. So we're going to copy the role, contribute, and remove these items from it so that those don't exist inside this add only permission level that we will then use to apply with groups that we create. That's completed. We got our groups created. So we've got our overall arching report group manager, and we've got our base security groups that we're going to use to enable it. If anybody wants to be dropped in there, they could modify anything and everything in here. We got to create a document library. And like I said earlier, everything in SharePoint is pretty much a list. So even the document library holds files, but it's still a list in SharePoint space. Let's get that created. We're using a template document library. There's a couple dozen different types of templates. This would be a generic list in document library, or probably your two most common used ones. And now we can actually use PnP to set our permissions on this brand new document library. We're going to do that now. Let's go take a look at what we're seeing over here now. So we're in this area, people and groups. Groups, we can see there's our new security groups that we have created. If we want to edit one real quick, we can come in, edit this. We can change a few things about it. We can see the reports group manager is managing it. That's important, so we can hand this off to someone else. Let's look at retail and all their site contents. Here's our new reports. Sorry, we're losing some. There we go. Waking back up. Projector went to sleep here. Here's our library. Let's go look at the permissions, library settings. Sorry. We can do that. Oh yeah, let's go to library settings. And let's dive into permissions for this document library. You can see now the default permissions, which are typically members can read. There's an owners group, there's a visitors group. Those are not in there anymore. We just have those 3 groups that we just created. Going forward, those will get pulled along the way as we build out new folders. So let's create our first set of subfolders for each region in this document library. So again, let's look at the data again real quick. We've got 3 regions, some countries in each region. We've got managers for each region, and we got a few different country managers. So let's build out our first row of the first subset of folders. Add PnP folder. That's the command there that gets that done. This is setting the data up so we can take advantage of that set of data we have and run through each one of those regions easily. Go back and look at our folder. There's our folders now. Now we need to create some security groups that we're going to apply to those folders. That's what we're going to do here. And we're creating 3 for each region. Again, we were told we want somebody who can view everything, add everything, modify everything. So now we have the option with what we're going to do is we could add somebody that says this person can modify anything in the Americas. We've created the groups. Now we need to apply those permissions. And this is where we are performing that. There's our folder permissions. We're going to give view group that we just created. This is the view group that we just created. We're going to give it a role, a permission level of read. And this is the one that we created ourselves, just add only role. And that's for add. And modify is same thing as, in this case, we're going to use the role contribute. Nothing to see there. That's all behind the scenes. We'll look at the permissions a little bit deeper here as we go along. Now we need to create the country folders. Let's create the country folders in each one of these regions. Again, we're going to add PnP folder. Next, for that, now we've got to go and create, for every one of those folders, we've got to create our security groups to get people down into the country level. So I'm going to let that run, and then we'll go take a look at what we're starting to build. So let's dive a little deeper. Let's go to Americas. Got some folders there. And if we go back into our people in groups, our groups should be growing. Going to have quite a few in here before we're done. Almost complete. All right. Now we're going to apply, again, continuing, we did region, now we're doing county, now we're going to add and do the permissioning. Let's go look at that. Let's see if it has completed. Let's refresh. Let's take a peek at results. Not there yet, but we can see some of the permissions are in there. Here's our root level, all files. That has come along with us. We're down at the country level. It can view, add, has some special permissions, but modify. We can see they can edit. Same thing with Americas. Anybody in Americas with modify, they can get into this area. Let's go see if that has completed. That will take a bit. Back to, let's try Europe. So there, this one is completed. Now we can see there's our Australia level permissions. That is working. And it's done. Let's add some users into these groups. We've got our regional managers. Let's get them access to their content. So for every region, we've got a regional manager, and we're building their UPN. We're building their email address, their authentication account that we need as part of our command to provide group membership, adding to a group. We've got our group. We're going to do is we're going to add these regional managers into a modified group for that region. Only 3 of them, quick. So we've got, let's go take a look what that looks like in SharePoint. So let's see, America's modify. There's Adele. Retail manager would have the ability to go in and modify anything in the Americas for her team. Come back. And we're going to do the same thing for our country managers. They're going to get added into each of our country groups. And the last step we're going to do after that completes is SharePoint has a concept. The terminology you would research is something called security trimming. You only can see things that you have been given permission to. You can do the same kind of thing with NTFS permissions on standard Windows file shares. You get some of the ability there too. We can do the same thing here. This group of code is setting that up for us. We basically have to get someone, I call it getting them into the door. We have to get them into the root folders, the regional folders, so they can see the country folder that they've been permissioned into. Most of our users are going to go into those country folders. They can't get there. They can't see that. We got to kind of get them through the tree first. So that's what this process is going to set up for us. That's complete. And think for time, what I would do is I'm just going to continue on for that. But that is a way that this is something I've set up and for several years of working in SharePoint, a number of years in SharePoint, set this kind of concept up for users, sending out reports, financial reports for different departments across where I work. That has worked out very well. Let's jump into a bit of Microsoft Teams module and how do we build out a team? How can we create a team with that module? Our goal right now is we want to create a Microsoft team. We've got a name. It's got a nickname. This ends up being used as sort of a behind the scenes mail object. We can give it a description, and I want to create some channels. I can do that with our PowerShell module. I've got a display name for that channel. I've got a description, and I've got another column here that I'm calling breakout quantity. Some cases we have a need where we want, in this case, it's vendors. We're building something for some online convention, and we want to build 3 vendor channels. So that's what this script is going to do. So let's get the basics of what we want to build in Teams set up. So those are our channels that we want to build in a team. Again, we're going to end up with 3 vendor channels. So now we're switching over to using Microsoft Teams, a module, connect over there with Megan. She is working very hard today for us. We've got a good connection. New team. We need to feed it a little bit of information. I'm feeding it a little bit of extra information. That is basically what you want to provide at a minimum. We can also preset some things around security of this team. We don't want members to delete channels, remove apps, things like that. We can set that up to right at the very beginning, right at the start of this process. So that's going to get the team built. That's the basics of the team built, but not the channels yet. Let's pop over into. So we see it starting to pop up for us. That's good. That's completed. Something that you need often using these Microsoft Teams module is the group ID of a team. That's how you call that. Make sure you're working with the proper team. Since I saved my creation of the team into a variable, I was able to immediately grab that group ID and begin using it. A nice good there. Now, sometimes I'm given, again, I'm shortcutting this a little bit by having created that, that set of data inside this browser for us. But typically, I will give someone an Excel template, and they will give me back that Excel template of what they want this to look like, and I will go use it. I'll do a little sanity check just in case they decide they want, you know, a couple hundred channels, which is possible, but I want to know that beforehand. Thankfully, this one, they want 8 channels. That's what we're going to build. So let's go build our channels. Some things early on, a couple of years ago, sometimes I felt like I was getting throttled, and I was building some teams that were 50, 100 channels at a time. I took that out, but this is going to walk through our data and build each of those channels. I love emojis in front of the channel names. It takes that. We can do that. A little bit of code in here is trying to figure out if someone's given me, again, if they have given me up to 99 breakout channels. I'm going to use 2 digits for those. And when you see this, it'll make sense. And if they want over that, we're going to use 3 digits at the end of that. So we should end up with vendor 01, 02, 03 when we kick this off. Here's our channels coming up. And there's vendor 01, 02, and we'll get an 03 in there. Let's finish this up. Let's add another owner. So Megan isn't the only person. It's a good best practice to at least have another owner, not too many of them. And let's bring Esther in as well as a member into that team. Let's go look at some of those settings that we did, and we're going to manage this team. We can look at our settings for some of the permissions. When we built this team initially from the beginning, I decided I didn't want members to delete or restore channels and things like that. And we can see we've got our owner coming in. They'll start populating. It could take a little bit for them to show up in the interface. Just really quick, I can't really show you a great demo without exposing too much information. I don't have a full hybrid demo tenant process set up, but I want to show you some PowerShell. It's not using any of those modules. Sometimes going to the cloud is slow. If you've got thousands and thousands of teams, groups, if you are hybrid on premises and you've got Active Directory, you've got it syncing up into your Microsoft 365 environment. What I'll show you here is going to be usable for you. You do need to have the ability to read membership of security groups in your Active Directory for this to work. That may not be the case in many Active Directory environments. But what I've got here, and I'll have shared it, is ability to use on-premises information, because you are syncing. If you're hybrid, you're syncing all your Teams groups, your Yammer groups, your 365 groups in the cloud. That information is getting synchronized back to your Active Directory. And you can go hit that and discover it and work against it with PowerShell. So with this case, what this code is doing is, I wanted to know, is this owner, what do they own? What teams do they own? Now, typically this is helpful if you're offboarding a user. You want to get someone else into those teams as an owner. You don't want them to be the only person. So we can run some code to quickly find out who, what teams they own, what groups they own. Run that code. I'm going to get back at a name. I get back some group information. I can use that to then go discover cloud, more easily track down what I need to pay attention to make sure we get some other users in there. Maybe I give this to a global admin that says, hey, I need these groups, please add another person in there. If I'm not able to do that, or maybe that person's already offboarded and left. Another way is you can use this to get a nice report of a user's entire teams and their group memberships. And I've got some code that does that. So get basically these groups for the user. And again, this is super fast. It's on premises using get 80 user, get 80 management modules. And that's going to produce something that looks like this. There's some more data points, but this is kind of a report mode for it. I can see the number of members in that group. I can figure out who the owners of that group are and work with that. So thank you for staying a little bit longer with us. You will find those pieces of code up here, and let's bring, and eventually after this session, I'm going to bring over this file that I have been walking through, and I'll put it up here also. So there's those couple PowerShell commands up there, but I'll bring over this special polyglot file. We can talk. There's Jeff. Let me see here. There has been a blog post about what I've been doing right here, using just yesterday. It's up to the very beginning. Hopefully that worked out pretty well. I'd really love to hear some feedback, but these are based on Project Jupyter notebooks. and allow you to Microsoft's version of this, building on that and compatible with it. They are trying not to break anything. This is, of course, open source. They are bringing the ability, like in my case, I was able to bring PowerShell in from typically having Python code mapped into these files. But they're opening this notebook up to handle all of these languages at the same time in different code blocks. It is it's pretty cool environment to work in. If I wanted to start adding a code block down here, I can add a code block. I can decide what code language that is. I can choose different kernels, they call it. I can throw in Markdown and write your standard Markdown. That's how I'm doing these sections here, of course. This one I left off. I could come in here. I could show some line numbers. And again, like you saw, you can run individual code sections. I think some possible uses of this is handing out these files in a way that you could walk a user through a process. The code's there, they can get back, they can watch it walk through, they get responses as you complete your code. You can integrate it with instructions. It'd be really interesting to see if you've got a help desk, a support team eventually down the road where we're building these kind of processes out with these kind of files. So, and hopefully it worked fairly well for this chat today. Thank you very much. Anything in the chat for me?
Got a lot of compliments in the chat. It doesn't look like any outstanding questions.
Yeah, the emojis, those are fun. Putting those, team name even, I think I have a team that's called Bacon, 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 just 3 emojis. So I made it, it's a public group at my institution. It's interesting to people, it's only memes of bacon posted in it. And it's interesting to see people pop in, understand what you're supposed to do, post and pop back out. It's pretty fun. But yeah, take advantage of those emojis. Yeah, the permissioning this, it would be impossible. There would be so many steps to try to get right to build out the groups to permission a cloud document library this way. That this is really the only way to do it. And this is repeatable. I mean, I'm taking code that I've been running for years, and every once in a while tweak it here and there, or PnP.PowerShell is something easier to do, and just blast these out for people. And it really helps us move things into the cloud, where they've gotten our group of people that we work with really gotten used to using the Microsoft 365 suite of tools in the cloud. And this is one more way to get data where they want to work.
I think that repeatability and consistency piece is what really, for me, resonates. Is being able to, most of the time, you're not going to do something one time. I know in our environment, we spit out new sites for people all the time, and being able to do it, with just changing out the name of the group that it is, and making all the groups named and consistently, all the folders named, the sites named consistently, is a really great. Especially if you're going to come back later on and do something programmatically with it, then you have something that's consistent throughout that you can just go ahead and keep applying PowerShell to. It makes a big difference.
Very cool to see how big of an impact on like bulk things like that. Especially when
I feel like it takes to heart the PnP process, the patterns and practices. I've had this pattern of what a document library for pushing out reports has looked like. And that's, you know, my pattern. This is my practice. How do I make that happen? So.
Can you post a link to your GitHub slides in the chat real quick?
Yeah, let me at least get to that. And again, the work that I was going through is not there yet. I'll get a copy of that file up there. You probably will need to do a little work. Might be fun. So that's the blog on how I was doing the polyglot notebook there. That is in the chat. And let's drop the GitHub in there. Oh, it's just one back. There we go. Should do it. And I might see if there's a way to print this and output it, maybe produce a PDF or something like that, just to get easier access to some of those links. I can drop some of those into the chat too. I think one I really liked was the lookbook. If you are been in SharePoint for a while, and not seen this, you really can do some cool stuff with this. Some of those can be deployed. Some of these examples can be deployed by global admin or SharePoint admin. I found I can kind of download them and deploy them myself, a few of them. So, but you might need some help getting some of those in use in your environment. And let me drop the PnP into the chat real quick. And I think that should do it for the key links here. Just for completeness there. And this thing really helps you, like, I don't work in Markdown all the time, so I can highlight some text. It gives me a little pop-up. It's like, oh, I want to make that bold. Now it's bold. Save it, done. It's really slick. Again, thank you, everyone. Online and here in the